Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing how to make this fun, colorful, sushi-themed card where the bears are eating sushi. And it has a cute sort of handmade, hand-stamped sentiment, custom, and just a bunch of cute lawn fawn images. The background is pretty easy to make as well, and I'll be sharing that throughout the video. So without further ado, let's get into the card making. I'm starting by sort of assembling the pieces for the background, and here I've cut out a navy blue card base, a piece of red pattern paper cut to be slightly smaller than the card base, and then a piece of white cardstock which I ran through an embossing folder that embosses these corrugated lines. And that again is slightly smaller than that piece of red cardstock, so you see all the pieces of the borders peeping through. Then for the floor, I cut out a piece of Woodgrain cardstock from Lawn Fawn, matching the size of that white piece, and that again is just meant to be the floor, and the white piece is meant to be the wall. So now that all of that is assembled, I'm going ahead and stamping out my custom sentiment, and for this I'm using the Milo's ABC stamp set from Lawn Fawn, which is just this set of like tall, thin letters that in a really nice font. How I like to assemble these letters when I'm assembling words with kind of letter stamp sets is to assemble all the letters together for one word at a time. So I started with sushi, and I just assembled together all the letters for sushi. Then I'll do me, and then I'll do rollin' next. And I find that stamping them out one word at a time kind of just makes it easier to line things up. If you try to line up too many words at a time, I find it's just easier for like one of the words to go off a little bit, and then you have to redo the whole thing, and it becomes kind of annoying. So one word at a time, and just kind of make sure to line it up with the other words as you're stamping it. And that's always worked out for me. So on the top, I did Sushi Me Rollin', which I think is more of a pun on an old rap song, which the recipient of this card who I'm giving it to, I'm actually giving this to my brother-in-law. He loves sushi and he loves rap music, or vintage rap music, I guess. So I think that the pun will go over well with him. And then on the bottom, I stamped out Happy Birthday. Now, I stamped those out, by the way, onto thin strips of vellum, and I just wanted them to be see-through and not really be too overbearing on the card front, and that's why I used vellum. So for the rest of the images, I'm stamping them out onto some white cardstock using My Favorite Things Extreme Black ink, and I'm stamping them onto Neenah Solar White cardstock. And I'm just using this combination of ink and cardstock because both are very good for Copic coloring, which if you've watched enough of my videos, you know is my favorite method of coloring. I think I color with Copics in every single video almost on my channel. So I have lots of examples of Copic coloring. If you want to see more, just head over to my channel, the homepage, and you'll see all the other videos I've done, most of which have Copic coloring in them. So now it's time to get into the coloring. Again, I'm using Copics. So for my Copic coloring technique, I use a very similar technique in almost all of my videos, and that is to start with a dark shade and blend it out with a light shade. Sometimes I use a medium shade in between, but not always. If I want the images to be very light, I make my darkest shade actually pretty light. Like I start with a light shade, but count it as the dark shade. And then for the light shade, I go even lighter. So if I wanted the bear to be very light, I might have started with like a C2 as my dark shade and then used a C0 as my light shade. And then what I do in those cases, if I want the image to be very, very light, I often leave white space. And I used to be afraid of doing this because I always thought it would look weird. Like, why would you want to leave white space in a colored image? But it actually acts as a really nice way of highlighting space. And it doesn't look weird. I encourage you to kind of try it out at home if you're kind of wondering how to make images appear lighter, and if you ever find that like your images appear darker than you want them to when you're coloring, try leaving some white space. You might like how it turns out. And what I sometimes do also when I'm doing that is in the white space, I'll kind of go over the edges of it with my 0 marker, which is the colorless blender. The colorless blender is just plain alcohol that has no dye or pigment to it. And what it does is it kind of softens the edges because it kind of pulls some of that ink, I guess, or dye out of the edge where it was colored, if that makes any sense. Anyways, give it a try. It's hard to explain, but once you try it, you'll probably get a handle for it. And I find using the colorless blender in white spaces kind of helps soften those edges from where you had colored and kind of makes the highlighting appear just a little bit more smooth. Okay, so that being said, I did color in all of these bears with C, so gray markers that were cool gray from the Copics. And I did color them in fully, so I didn't actually leave any white space on these ones as much as I talked about it. I went, I guess, a little bit on a tangent there, but You know, for these bears, I did just color them in with, I believe, C3 and C1 as my main colors. I wanted to use red, green, and blue as my main accent colors for the rest of the card because I had already incorporated red into that card base, like the border of the card base, as well as blue as the card base itself. So I added green as a third accent color. For that table there, I colored it in with some red shades. The soy sauce I colored in brown. Obviously, I wanted to keep it realistic. And then the edamame pea I colored in green, and then the wasabi I also accidentally colored in green before I realized it probably shouldn't be green. I believe it should be like pink or red, but it was too late and I was like, whatever, it'll be green wasabi, that's fine. So I left it as it is, and it's okay. It's bears eating sushi, so how realistic does it have to be, right? For the sushi rolls themselves, I used some dark gray shades to kind of make them have more of a very dark gray or black look, but I still colored them into the center using light shades, so it looks like they're kind of highlighted in the middle. I then used a combination of red, green, and blue colors to color in the middle of those sushi rolls, colored in the mug with some red, and then finally came around to the chopsticks and colored them in with two brown shades, just a dark and a light. You'll notice a couple images are not colored. That's because I kind of messed up their stamping. So I stamped them again and colored in the properly stamped ones. Okay, so I've gone ahead off camera and cut out all of those colored images, and now I'm ready to assemble the card. I started by gluing on that red piece down onto the blue card base, and now I'm gluing the floor onto the white wall piece, and then I can glue that whole thing down onto the red piece. So really just gluing everything together with liquid glue. Before I glue the white piece down though, I need to adhere my sentiment strips, and because these are vellum, I can't really just put adhesive behind them or else you would see the adhesive through the vellum. So what I'm doing is I'm just folding them at each edge where they'll fold around the edge of the card panel there, and then adding some adhesive to the back. So I'm just using my scoreboard to score them properly so that they fold nice and smooth around that card panel. And then I'm just taking some double-sided tape and putting it onto the backings where it's folded over. And then once I release the release paper, I can just stick that straight down onto the back of the panel. And I just do it one at a time so that when I glue down the second side, I can just make sure it's nice and straight compared to the first side. So for the second panel with Happy Birthday, I'm doing the same thing. I just made a couple markings with pencil where I needed to fold, used my scoreboard to fold them, made sure the folds were nice and straight. Then I can add some double-sided tape onto the back of the folded pieces and then stick them right down onto the back of that panel one at a time, making sure it's nice and straight. So that is how I like to adhere vellum strips onto cardstock. It just hides the adhesive so nicely you don't even know it's there. So now that that's done, I can adhere that whole panel down onto that red piece, again just using some liquid glue so everything lies nice and flat. For the rest of the images, I'm just gluing them together where they need to be glued together using liquid glue. So I'm adding the little bits of food onto this table, and then I can add foam behind it and elevate it off of the card panel. I wanted to put the mug into this little bear's hands, but to do that I had to make the space so that the mug could just slot behind the arms. So I'm just cutting around the arms with an X-Acto knife and just sliding that mug right in. If you have the coordinating dies for this stamp set, I believe there's a die that will do this for you, but I don't have the dies, so I can use an X-Acto knife and it kind of just does the same thing. It's a little bit messier, I think, but if you can just touch it up with a marker, then you don't really notice how messy it is. So there it is. The mug is just tucked into that little bear's arms. Once that's done, I'm just sticking some foam behind all of these little images and kind of placing them where I want them to be on the panel. I wanted this little bear kind of sticking up behind the table with the chopsticks in its hands. So I'm just gluing the chopsticks together, and then I can just glue the chopsticks into the hands of the bear, and then all of that is ready to go. So then I can just stick some foam onto the back and I can stick it down. Before I stick anything down with foam onto the panel directly, I am just making sure all of the images are where I want them to be so everything lines up nicely. And then I can come through one at a time and take the release paper off of each image one at a time and stick it down. And this just makes sure that everything is stuck exactly where you want it to be and nothing is really out of place. So that third little bear is just on the left side there, eating his sushi on the left side of the table. So that's it. That is the card for today. It's actually a fairly simple card, no ink blending, no huge scene building, just sort of some simple images on a simple base. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of my videos, definitely head back to my YouTube homepage. There's a lot more to check out. And if you want to see more of my cards, make sure to head over to my Instagram account, which is linked down in the description box below, where I post even more cards than I do here on YouTube. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!